Mamallapuram is on the coast of Tamil Nadu. It was a busy port in times gone by. Coins found here and literary evidence testify to flourishing trade 2000 years ago with Rome, Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka and other places.
Actually, there are many archaeological sites in and around this Mamallapuram, which yielded Roman potteries and also Roman coins, some of them are Roman coins. But it's in this particular site in which we excavated, there is much of the 1st century AD coins or 1st century BC coins have been discovered during 1930s by Britishers.
In ancient times, the sailors who came here from distant lands must have been fascinated when they stepped ashore. It was a city where boulders and hills were transformed into a magical world by sculptors. Surely there was no other such place in the world.
Mamallapuram, what used to be called Mahabalipuram, is really the beginning of art and architecture in Tamil Nadu. And the transition from rock cut to structural architecture is there, and we have this fantastic mix of cave temples, of monolithic temples, of structural temples, all embellished with the most beautiful and the most refined sculptural compositions. And there is no doubt that late 7th, early 8th century Pallava sculpture was never really surpassed in the whole history of Tamil art.
"1,400 years ago, when ships from distant lands would have come to the port of Mamallapuram, the sailors would have gotten off the ships and soon they would have seen in front of them this wondrous sight, a hill face which has been transformed by sculptors to represent the teeming life of the world. There are figures here of men and animals carved with skill, delicacy and sensitivity. Imagine how they would have described this place when they went back home. This exuberance of sculptural art took place under the rule of the Pallavas. By the end of the 6th century, the Pallava rulers from present-day Andhra Pradesh extended their control over much of Tamil Nadu. They created the first large empire of South India. This port town was called Mamalai or Great Hill. The Pallava king Narasimhavarman, known as Mamalla or the Great Warrior, expanded the facilities of the port. Narasimhavarman changed the name of the port to Mamallapuram or City of Mamalla. Here, over perhaps 100 years, from about 630 to 728 AD, marvelous monuments were cut out of outcrops of hard grey granite. The magnificent temples of Mamallapuram reflect fully developed styles of South Indian temples. Obviously, such temples must have been made for a long time prior to this period. The earlier ones must have been made out of wood and other materials which have not survived. Facing the ancient port and not very far from it is one of the marvels of the sculptural art of India. A granite hill face almost 100 feet by 50 feet has been transformed into a world of divine and earthly beings. This giant relief is believed to be of the early or middle 7th century. This tableau presents the auspicious moment of the descent of the river Ganga to bestow her blessings and her treasure of fertility to the world. Some scholars have also interpreted this scene to be of the penance of Arjuna, the hero of the epic Mahabharata. A deep cleft in the rock has been artfully used to represent the great river as she descends. We see Bhagirath, the sage, performing great penance and imploring Shiva to bear the force of the fall of the river. Next to him stands Shiva, whose gesture indicates that he is granting a boon to the ascetic. Nagas and Naginis, divine serpents who live in the waters, are made swimming up the river. A teeming world in a forest has been created. About 100 figures of animals, men, women and divine beings all turn in reverence towards the life-giving river. These have all been made approximately life-sized and with great sensitivity and naturalism. Below Shiva, we see a shrine of Vishnu with an elderly sage and disciples before it. To the side of the river, other ascetics perform puja and penance.
I don't think we have anywhere else in Tamil art anything that is greater. So it's one of those beginnings which are also the greatest moments. And the quality of Pallava sculpture is remarkable because we have to remember that it's all cut into this rather crystalline, not extremely fine granite. So it's extremely difficult to model figures in this type of material. You cannot make very deep carving, but you can make very rounded carving.
Not very far from the vast relief is another depicting the same subject. However, this is unfinished. A little to the side of the great descent of the Ganga, a Krishna Govardhana is carved out of a boulder. Lord Krishna holds up the Govardhana mountain to protect the village from the fury of the storm. It is a charming scene. With peace restored and the storm forgotten, a cowherd plays the flute. Another milks a cow. This is one of the finest depictions of rustic life in Indian art.
And there is a sort of melting, three-dimensional quality to these reliefs, which I think is very remarkable, very delicate, and very emotional. And the delicate way in which the animals and the herdspeople are shown, the delicate way in which Krishna's brother is reassured that nothing will happen, it will be okay, the storm will not affect the villagers, is very touching.
Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the art of ancient India is the sensitivity and even love which is shown towards all living beings. We see here not only the close observation of the life of animals, but even tenderness which is expressed in the manner in which the cow licks her calf while she is being milked.
Again, in the whole history of Indian sculpture, you won't see anything which is more naturalistic and more delicately rendered. So there's a wonderful relationship between the artist and the world of humans and animals, which we don't get in later Indian art. Even in Tamil Nadu, things become much more rigid, much more restricted. We have great icons of Shiva and Vishnu and the goddess in various forms, but that sort of delicacy, that everyday world, disappears from Indian sculpture.
When this theme was carved in Pallava times, behind Krishna there was a whole hill. There was nothing made in front. So if you stood before it, you would see Krishna lifting the hill. Somewhere around the 16th century, somebody must have thought this is a sculpture of a deity. So they built a mandapa or hall in front of it. A formal purpose may have been served by this, but the effect of the sculpture was lost. The soft rendering and slender forms of the Pallava idiom in sculpture are again seen in the Varaha Mandapa of around the middle of the 7th century. There are 4 major sculptural panels in the cave. Vishnu is seen in the Varaha avatar. He saves the earth goddess Bhudevi from being submerged in the ocean. Vishnu is again presented in the form of Trivikrama, the conqueror of the 3 worlds. The rear wall of the cave has Gajalakshmi made on it. Lakshmi, who represents prosperity, is here bathed by elephants who pour water upon her. A cave of a very unusual form is made on the outskirts of Mamallapuram. 11 Vyalas or lions with horns are made on the facade. One of the most magnificent depictions in Mamallapuram is that of Mahishasur-Mardini, made in a 7th century cave. Mahishasur-Mardini, where Durga destroys the Mahisha, the buffalo, the demon of our ignorance, is one of the most favorite themes of the Indian artist. And this depiction of the 7th century is one of the most beautiful depictions ever. The lines of the composition are very dynamic. On the one hand, we have the regal and proud Durga advancing upon the Mahisha. And on the other side, the Mahisha leans away and all his followers lean away as if to get away from Durga and her army. The self-assured Ganas of Durga's army are unforgettable. There is a sense of dynamic movement expressed by every line in this composition. Even the strings of jewels below her bosom are made curved with the movement as she goes forward.
But we have no doubt about who is going to win in this battle. But as an expression of, I would say, dynamism, of force and of movement, it's absolutely unsurpassed. And it contrasts in the most dramatic and obvious way with a panel on the other side of the cave temple, and this shows Vishnu asleep on the coils of Ananta or Shesha, the cosmic serpent, dreaming of the universe yet to be created. And as in many representations, the hoods of the serpent rise over the head of the sleeping god. And it's such a repose, such a quiet, serene composition can hardly be imagined anywhere else in Indian art, and of course completely different to Durga on the other side.
In Mamallapuram, there are 9 freestanding temples cut out of boulders. 5 of these form one group. These are the earliest such edifices in India, which are carved both on the outside and the inside out of a single rock. These are popularly called rathas or temple chariots. This is a misnomer as they are actually temples. These are a marvelous record in stone of the many forms of temple architecture in South India at that time. The temples are named after the 5 Pandava brothers of the Mahabharata epic and their common wife Draupadi. They form a coherent group and were probably made in the middle of the 7th century. The smallest temple is called the Draupadi Ratha. It has a curved roof which is believed to be modelled after the thatched roofs of that period. The shrine is dedicated to Durga. The lion on which she rides is made outside the temple. Arjuna's Ratha is an early example of a developed South Indian style temple. The 2-tiered pyramidal roof is capped by a dome-like element called a stuti. Half figures are made on the upper levels, which convey the impression that they are partly hidden owing to the viewer's perspective from below. Bhima's Ratha is a rare record of a barrel-vaulted temple. The long shape is appropriate for the large depiction of the reclining Vishnu, which remains unfinished inside. The unfinished Dharmaraja Ratha is the largest of the group. Inscriptions with the name of Narasimhavarman I, also known as Mamalla, suggest that the temple was begun in his time. It presents the fully developed South Indian temple style as seen in the Arjuna Ratha. These form the basis of the temples to come in the later Chola, Vijayanagara and Nayaka periods. There is a unique feature about the art of ancient India. Through hundreds of years, thousands of works of art were created. These depicted deities. They also depicted birds, animals, trees, common people, and yet they never showed a portrait of the king in whose rule all this art was created. In fact, there were no portraits at all. For in the Indian thinking, personalities are ephemeral things. We come and we go, and we do not really matter. In fact, the important thing is to lose the ego and to realize that which is important, that which is beyond our egos and personalities. Therefore, portraits were never made in ancient Indian art. It is only in the 7th century, during the rule of King Mahendravarman, that we have the first portrait of a king, which is seen in the Adi Varaha cave at Mamallapuram. We see him and his wives. We also see his son, King Narasimhavarman, with his wives there. And here in the 5 Rathas, we see King Narasimhavarman made outside the cave temple. Now, with the direct patronage of temples by Pallava rulers, these are significant changes which we start seeing in the tradition of Indian temples and art. The 5th temple of the group has an apsidal shape, which is not used very often in Indian temples. This is known as an elephant back-shaped temple. Built right next to the lapping waves of the sea, one of the glories of Mamallapuram is a temple with 2 towers, known as the Shore Temple. The finely worked, slender towers are among the most beautiful of any structure in India. The temple was probably made by Narasimhavarman II, Rajasimha, in the early 8th century. It is believed to have established the tradition of building structural stone temples in Tamil Nadu. Over 1200 years of salt-laden winds have taken their toll, and the profusion of sculptures on the temple has been considerably eroded. However, what remains shows the highest standards of artistic achievement. The Shore Temple was built later as the sea withdrew. Early in the first millennium, the sea used to come up till here. And the wall that I'm sitting on used to be a breakwater. Large ships used to come all the way in and used to be moored here. The recent excavation of a 4th century temple at Mamallapuram has pushed back the known dating of the site. Literary evidence and historical evidence would suggest that there must have been many grand temples here since at least the 1st century AD.
After the last the tsunami, we could find some inscriptions on the boulder. So then we started exploring the entire area. We could find some more the architectural pieces all around. Then we started more scientific excavations in and around that boulder. We could suddenly find within 1 meter depth, we could find some more Pallava inscriptions. There was a brick temple. That is very interesting brick temple. It's belonging to pre-Pallava era, earlier than the 3rd century AD. Then we started the full excavation. Then we found a full temple, a small Garbhagriha and also Ardha Mandapa and a small Mandapa in front. And we found round about 350 to 400 AD, there was a tsunami-like attack over the coast, and that has pulled down this temple. But interesting aspect of this temple is that it is one of the earliest temples so far discovered in Tamil Nadu, which we can climb.
What gives the art of ancient India a special place is its vision of the world. A view which sees the same in each of us, in men and women, in animals, even in plants and trees. It sees a unity in the whole of creation, which imparts a great harmony and compassion to this vision. Ancient Indian art is very special in the way that it portrays animals, birds, the whole of nature. It seems very important for the early sculptors to convey the breath of life of these animals. At Mamallapuram, we see some of the greatest examples of this naturalistic art, filled with the tender vision of the artist.